Hey guys, Infidel1258 here. Today I want to talk to you about the speed meta and how I think there's probably going to be some nerfs coming to what we understand and how we understand the game. First, I'm going to try and articulate how important speed is, showing you some examples of that stuff. And then I'm going to try and speak into what I would expect as counters to come out, either from the legendary Chaos Legion summoners that are yet to come, or even from new abilities that will soon release through the reward cards that we can expect in probably the next 6 months. So let's get into that. If that sounds interesting, stick around, stay tuned, like and subscribe. I noticed we have about 26% of the viewers that are not subscribed. And so if you're watching this content, especially if you're enjoying it right to the end, if you're watching every single day as we create content for Splinterlands, definitely encourage you to subscribe. When I sort of reach some significant milestones, I definitely will do some big celebrations, giveaways. So if you're here anyways, just hit that button. Okay guys, let's get into it. So, I think the first things first, obviously speed is paramount importance in Splinterlands today, and it really has been ever since, I would argue, ever since Kitty and Untamed, because that really transformed what was possible. Like +2 speed from a single summoner was the first time that I felt there was a broken card in the game. And I still think Kitty is just so ridiculous, because not only is that speed, because the thing about speed is if you hit first, you can kill them before they ever fire. That happens time and time and time again. If I come with a Kitty, or even frankly, if I come with like somebody else who gives like a +1 or a plus or a -1 speed, which is like a Pyre or even like one of the more modern cards, like even Quix the Devious, who restricts your speed by 1. All of that can allow me to kill you before you ever fire, especially if I bring a fast team and you bring like 1 speed monsters. And you can't win if you don't fire. So speed is crazy ridiculous. And the idea now, ever since they've introduced phase, magic was always this thing, right? Magic was always this ability that you couldn't avoid. And it has become something. Phase didn't exist in alpha, beta, promo, reward, it did only in mod. These are modern reward cards. This was the first card, I think. Yep, Nightmare was the very first card they released with phase in it, and it became, that was around the time shortly thereafter Kitty was released, and that was the first partnership of this new ability that I thought was absolutely broken. Kitty with Nightmare, you get 10, 11, 12 speed in certain conditions. If you have enough swiftness or slow on your team, you can really make it impossible to hit me. Like, it's absolutely impossible unless you bring True Strike. And so True Strike in and of itself is kind of a counter to this speed meta, and it absolutely is helpful. But the problem is, well, first let me conclude. Phase has changed the game, and it added to the speed meta. It made it so that even magic, which was always a sure hit, wasn't no longer a sure hit. That was a gigantic move that I don't think we often think about closely enough. And this actually, this change in the meta is continuing to evolve, because we're seeing more and more and more phase being created. Void Dragon just added to the list. Chaos Agent from Chaos Legion. And then when we add Rift Watchers, we get still more. And still, you might say that this is relatively not that many, but look at what's happened. We have the Chaos Agent now, who's a neutral, and therefore can slip in on any team, under any summoner, with any sort of speed manipulations to really be effective. Core Lurker, which everybody seems to love now and has been shooting up because it does all of what we're describing in one package. It's got the speed, it's got the evasiveness, and it has the phase. And so it is very much like a modern day Nightmare, but on steroids. And it's potentially just not hittable. Like if you bring the right squad to support that card, for instance, if you had Kitty and you brought the Lurker and you had a bunch of speed manipulation, good luck hitting me. And then especially in an Enrage rule set, because the rule set with Enrage could make your Core Lurker go from, 10 speed to 15 or whatever, something ridiculous. And so this is absolutely the meta, and it's been growing and growing and growing in terms of its impact and reach within the meta, because of, like I said, phase leaning into and taking away that component of, well, we've got magic and we'll always hit you with our magic. No, you won't. Phase is now here and growing. And so once we understand and agree that speed is definitely the main way to win this game, and in fact, it can allow me to delete you before you ever fire, and therefore, even if you bring beasts, it doesn't matter because who cares? They're not going to get a shot off. I just think you have to start there, and if you agree that that's all true, then I think we need to recognize that there's always ebbs and flows to how they develop the game. They lean in. At first, magic was a real. Would always hit you. That now it's becoming not. Evasiveness, therefore, is now taking over. And as evasiveness takes over, I think we're going to see a response, especially because of how powerful the lurker has been and how evasive it is. And because it's neutral, like we said with the Chaos Agent, it can therefore apply. And then this is similar because Dragon is going to partner with a lot of different monsters. As a result of this, you're going to see you have so much more evasiveness right here because of the neutrality that can be applied across all splinters, and this spell which can bring that phase to any monster in the game. And these are just a few examples, but speed, this is not the limitation of where speed is coming from, right? We get if you look at swiftness monsters, they've grown. A lot of these are, if we delete some of these oldies, these are just Untamed and Beyond. These are just, yeah, Chaos Legion really brought it. And then slow is the same deal. Slow monsters are growing and growing in the modern from Chaos and Rift Watchers. Are these all Chaos? You know, this is Rift Watchers. So I mean, I really think that this is the evolution of where the game's going, but I don't think that'll be always so. I think one of the things that this game does really well is that it has balance. It creates a counter to a counter to a counter and so on. And I think we've seen very little True Strike. I think some of these cards have been really, really, I would argue, really, really powerful. The Gorludon is something that I've heralded as for a long time as a very amazing card. Tidebiter, I think, fits extremely well with the blue team and as a secondary tank with its reflection shield and the True Strike. Dampier Stalker is one that I've really become attached to and use quite often. I've talked to you guys about how I think the Sliptic Slime has a really impressive role within the fire team, especially on the slow mana, the reduced reverse speed rule sets. Jin Chwala, I think, is a real winner. And a lot of these cards are, really, frankly. I mean, they all really are in the right setting. But I think True Strike is part of the answer to the speed thing. But when we look at the fact that I just showed you summoners that are going to apply to every single team and cards that are going to apply to every single splinter because of their neutrality, and you compare that to the limited window of availability for True Strike, I think we start to recognize that there has been perhaps a swing in the momentum towards speed meta that probably needs some correction. I think the developers are going to see it that way. Whether you love it and I love it, that's kind of neither here nor there. What I'm speculating about is what's the future direction of the game. And I think we've seen a real movement, as I tried to articulate in the first 2 minutes, about how it's become speed. And I think we're going to see a correction. And I have a few speculative ideas where I'd like to just share with you over the next few minutes, and that'll be the rest of the video, about what I think is coming. The first thing is that we haven't yet seen the rest of the legendary summoners from Chaos Legion. So we're going to get several airdrops, and we still have to get Death, Earth, Water. Who else? We've got Life. We've got Life and Fire. Okay, so we need Death, Earth, Water, and Dragon, right? I'm pretty convinced we're going to see a -2 speed summoner. And I actually think, I was speculating with this with my channel members and Jim Morgan a couple weeks ago, but I actually think it makes a lot of sense if you imagine that Death would be the reverse rule set king, that they would have, the reverse speed king. And I say that because thematically, like lore wise, they're always about life leech. They're always about like poison. They're about like kind of dark or negative status effects. That's the phrase I'm looking for. And They're very rarely about things like triage or heal or cleanse. They don't often have those abilities, but they definitely have negative status effects in abundance. And so I actually believe, and then I think bring that thematic concern or thought to the conversation around how impactful speed has become and how positive speed has been so meta. Or at least controlling the speed of the game has been so meta. I think a death summoner that brings in -2, especially since we now have Jassic who has +2 speed. We also have Kitty who has +2 speed. We also have Ilthane who's +1 speed. We have Kelly-Frendel who's +1 speed. Pyre +1 speed. There's so much speed manipulation within the summoners from a positive side, but there's what? Quixodevious on the negative side, and he's -1. And he's fine. I like him. But I think it's time, and it's probably appropriate to bring out the -2 speed summoner. And I think who would have it? You could say it might be Dragon because there's already Kitty, and then maybe they do the opposite kind of thing. That's possible, but I really think more thematically it makes sense from the death side. I don't really think we'd chalk it up to being a water or an earth. I just can't really see why that would be so. And then just from like an art perspective, I could really picture it. And if you just imagine the ooze, the creeping ooze, which is not a death specific card, but is a, kind of a monster card. It's like a big ball of ooze and it's eating everything it touches, apparently. It's got bones inside of the artwork. It's got like old warrior weaponry and stuff that it's just consumed, and it's got slow. I think you could see, and we've seen over the past, that they've reused and kind of reformatted some of the old cards in their themes. Like if you just look at the ants, we have the Ant Miner was the first card, and it's just like, it's a good solid tank for 2 mana, and it's got the scavenge, so it grows and grows and grows. It's got shield, so it can be quite resilient. It's a great card in the right context. And then they more recently created Antoid Platoon. And so the idea is that it's just more of them. And so for 4 mana, you're getting higher hit points. Plus it has that scavenge. Plus it has a shield. So it's a bit more damage doing. It's a bit more resilient. It's a bit more mana. And I think we've seen that quite a bit too. Like Mycelic, there's lots of different Mycelia. What else? Different classes of character that get reused and reused and reused. Wavesmith. The Wavesmith, the Venari. So there's a bunch of different Venari. That's another example. So they've done this time and time again where a certain class of card, the art within it, gets repurposed and reused across splinters, and they sometimes have the similar tone or utility. And I think, why couldn't we do that with the Ooze? I think we definitely could. We could picture an Ooze summoner. Maybe it's like an Ooze King, and he is -2 speed, and he's maybe... what are they? It'd probably be more negative status effects. Like it could be, I think Affliction would make some sense. -2 speed Affliction. Possibly Blind. I could picture it being like, not just ooze, but like, a cloud, like a poisonous, it could be poison. Status effect poison, and it could be like a poison cloud, and it would slow you, afflict you, poison you. That would be probably too nasty, but just think within that realm of kind of, that theme. The spell could be perhaps an interesting consideration. Again, I definitely think I think strongly it'd be a death summoner, and I think it would be negative status negative status effects. Life Leech? No, I think that's too much. Scavenge would be wild, really wild, but that would be really thematically appropriate because the ooze like absorbs everything it eats or it encounters. So how about like -2 speed scavenge and maybe Affliction, but I feel like that's too much. Or something like Snare, because I'm thinking like Spiderweb, I'm thinking the stickiness of the ooze, and Snare is not a deeply powerful ability. It is super powerful when you're fighting a flyer, but you're not often fighting flyers, and so it would be one of those abilities that would be probably thematically appropriate within the context I'm describing, and potentially really helpful, but not by itself game breaking. I think some of the other ones I mentioned, like poison, would be far more impactful, or affliction even. And so -2 speed, scavenge, and something like snare could be really interesting. Or even just a weaken. Weaken could be cool too. And so negative status effect, death summoner, legendary from the Chaos Legion. I think it's going to be like that. And I think it's because we've already seen too much of a swing toward the speed meta. And that's what you've seen more recently with the Lurker, plus with the phase. And I have a couple other ideas I quickly want to run by you guys on this line of thinking, because I do think speed needs more than just one summoner to kind of turn the tides. I think we probably need to see some more True Strike monsters. And that's one option. You could just go True Strike. We already have an ability for that. True Strike is here, and you could just do a couple more of these guys, and that would probably really help. We have some from every team. We got fire. We got 3 from fire. We got 1 from water and earth. We got 2 from white. So we could see a couple more on the blue team, and maybe bring it up to bring it up to 3 from every splinter. Because look, red's got 3 from their splinter. Maybe every splinter needs to have 3 True Strikers, and that might be enough to really square this issue. Because once you start to throw out the True Strikers, I don't care if you have 20 speed. When I punch, if I get a chance to punch, I'm gonna hit you. So True Strike's part of the solution, I think. And I wouldn't be surprised if they move toward like a 3 for every splinter, since they already have 3 for red, or at least, if not 3 from every splinter, everyone should have 2. I would argue that that's weird that they don't have a second on blue. They don't have a second on green. They do have on white. They do have on death. Maybe not dragon. They don't necessarily need more because they've got kitty, and kitty applies everywhere. So does the Chihuahua. So yeah, more True Strikers, but I think there's room for new abilities too. And I was thinking about specifically how taunt monsters are they're also part of the meta for sure, and they are incorporated in this speed conversation because cards like Lurker work so crazy when they get 5 speed and they get enraged due to the new fire summoner, and they go to, I think, 9 speed or 8 speed, plus you bring speed manipulation, and it's got phase built into it, it's got dodge, and it's got taunt. It's so evasive, it directs your attack, and it's going to dodge you most of the time. That's a crazy card. In the right context, it's a crazy card. With high mana matches, it's certainly amazing. And even the Kraken, it does the similar thing where 4 speed, but it has enrage. And I find that this thing, if you bring the right cards with it, is often super resilient and just often isn't hit because of the speed. And even Dark Wand, so taunts can totally use speed well. And one of the things I think is snare, like I said earlier, is not an overly powerful ability. It's not often deeply impactful, but I think sometimes something like a snare that specifically targets taunt monsters. Think snare, but for taunt monsters. I'm thinking like Big Game Hunter. That could be the ability. And when it's a taunt monster, it always hits. Like, it takes its time and it just targets a monster precisely, like precision fire for a taunt. It can't miss. It's like True Strike, but it's more focused and it's specific to taunt monsters. And so if we're concerned about True Strike maybe becoming too prolific, and because that's certainly a thing too, you don't want too many True Strike monsters, because then maybe we swing to the totally opposite end. Speed's irrelevant because you just bring True Strike monsters all the time, and you're gonna when you hit me, you're gonna finish me. So that's a concern too. You don't want the pendulum to swing too far back in the other direction. And so I think you could do a targeted ability that's specific to taunt monsters, and I think it'd be cool if it was called Big Game Hunter. And so that would be like, it's not necessarily the same as Giant Killer. Giant Killer is where you double damage somebody over 10 or over 10 mana cost. What I'm talking about is specifically would just be a 100% hit chance on regardless of speed, regardless of effect. Blind is irrelevant. Any sort of speed or dodge or blind or flight or any sort of chance to evade is irrelevant. If you're a taunt monster and I have Big Game Hunter, I hit you. That's one of the solutions I think could be really cool for the game, and I think it would help to correct what I've seen is a movement toward how important speed is for winning this game. And so I had another one too. The other ability I was imagining is something like, I don't necessarily have the same name, like an ideal name for it, but something like precision fire. And it would have to do with the idea that when there's a massive speed differential between my attacker and your defender, the game usually says that is good for you and bad for me. And I will, if there's a greater than 10 differential between your speed and mine, I'm going to miss you when I fire. And that's what people contrive to do. You do your best to make it so that your monster, your defender, is greater than 10 speed, faster than my attacker, and in so doing, you can't be hit. It's amazing when you do it, and it's really part of what people always do now, or try to always do. But what if there was something like a precision striker, who it's a new ability and they take their time, and they're a slow monster necessarily. They shoot, their speed is generally speaking 1, even at the highest levels. But they take their time. It's like, it could even be called like take your time or something like that. And when they fire, they do not miss. If their differential is the reverse, the mathematical equation around like whether you hit or evade is actually the opposite of what it is now. And so if there's a 10 differential, I'm going to hit you for sure. Versus if you're a slow monster too, that's where I actually could miss you. And so just a new ability to kind of introduce some sort of new angle on how we can think through the give and take on this amazing game. Because there really is so much fun here in how you build a team and how I counter, and then how you counter my counter, and so on. That's one of the amazing things about this game. It's not just one meta that exists. Yes, speed is so pivotal to the game right now, but it's not the only meta. I talked about taunt meta and how they are in some sense intertwined, but they are distinct in other respects also. And then there's other things too. There's amazing ways to play this game outside of that. Like I could list several other sort of plays that I'll try in certain ways, like often what I'll call cheese, like, using gelatinous cube and a bunch of kind of meat shields in a poison and an earthquake to just, out survive me rather than take me down. There's also like the weaken and redemption play that you've seen a lot of times, which can be really powerful in low mana matches. There's so many kind of unique styles of winning this game, but the evolution of that is where I'm excited to see. And I do expect that some of what I'm describing is already in the works, because I think we're going to see, I feel confident about what I said about the Death Summoner, or at least that one of the summoners is offering something like that. And if it's not, there should be one, because -2 speed makes a lot of sense given that we now have so much plus speed summoners. And those abilities I talked about, I think would be really great, especially the big game hunters, because I think it's different enough than True Strike, and it's focused enough at one niche of this game that's rapidly becoming a meta. Not to mention, we've seen the number of taunt monsters really grow and grow and grow. At first, it was just really, I think, it was really just this guy. No, it was this guy first, and then this guy, and then it's really blown up. So, yeah, I think Big Game Hunters is a cool idea. What do you guys think? What about the Precision Fire? Do you have a better name for that one? And do you think that it makes sense that we would do a -2 summoner? I really want to know what you guys have to say about this. Have an amazing day, guys. God bless.